Good morning, scholars. Today we are going to be talking about vocabulary in context. This is a valuable skill to be able to determine the meaning of a word or get a sense of a word from the context the word's in, but it's also the most heavily tested item on your EOC. So we're going to be practicing vocabulary in context quite a bit to get you ready to take the big test. So we're going to look at 5 different types of ways of determining the meaning of a word from context. First is tone. So I want you to write down tone and then positive or negative. That's going to help you a lot, and especially on the test, if you can determine that a word is a positive word, then you can probably eliminate 1 or 2 answer choices. There'll probably be an opposite tone answer choice on the test. So if we look at this sentence, reducing cholesterol has a number of beneficial results, such as reducing the risk of heart disease. If we're looking for the word beneficial, then we know that it has a positive connotation, because reducing cholesterol and reducing the risk of heart disease are good things, so that has to be beneficial. So when we looked at our answer choices, we could strike out any answer choices that were negative. All right, so tool number 1 is positive or negative. That's what you always want to ask yourself first. Number 2 is sometimes they'll give you an example of a word in the sentence. So if we look at this, you just need to write down examples. But if we look at this here, the student had several symptoms of severe anxiety, such as trembling uncontrollably when she saw the test. If we were looking for the meaning of anxiety, we have an example of what happens. Trembling uncontrollably when she saw the test. So trembling uncontrollably in a stressful situation. So that gives us a sense of the word from an example. All right, our third way to determine meaning from context is sometimes you'll get a synonym. I appreciate your candor. I love people who are honest. So from this sentence, if we're looking for the meaning of the word candor, we get the synonym honest. Candor has a slightly different bit of a meaning, but that gives you a good start on what the word means. All right, so make sure you have down 3 for synonym. 4, sometimes you'll get antonyms or opposite examples. For example, I can't stand his frugality. People need to spend some money sometimes. All right, so if we're looking for the word frugality, we can see here that the opposite is that people who spend money are not frugal. So frugal then means people who don't spend money, stingy people, or people who save their money. So that's your antonym or opposite examples. And then finally, an inference. So sometimes you can just put together the clues and try to figure out what it is. You can infer. So the haberdashery was Lou's favorite place. He loved shopping for nice suits. The people who worked there were so kind and helpful. All right, so we know that in a haberdashery, people shop for suits and people work there. So it's a store that sells suits. And the official definition would be a men's clothing store, a haberdashery. But we can get pretty close to that just figuring out that it's a store that sells suits. So that would be an inference. Okay, and those are your 5 ways to determine meaning from context. Now, on the EOC, they're not likely to choose really difficult words like haberdashery. what they're more likely to do is choose words that you're used to hearing one way, but they're being used differently in a particular environment. So if we look here, the king's descent down the stairs was awful, and we all bowed down to him. Awful used to mean that it filled you with awe. It inspired you. It was closer to awesome than our current use of awful. So that's a word that you're familiar with, awful, but it's being used differently. Same thing here in number 2. He was very liberal. He gave money to many charities. Now, in our modern context, you're more likely to hear liberal as leaning left politically. But in this sense, it would be a synonym for generous. We have an example here that he gave money to many charities. Or Plato's Apology is an important document in which his beliefs are outlined. We think of an apology as saying you're sorry when you do something wrong, but in this sense, long ago, it just simply meant a document where you stated your beliefs. Okay, so be careful, and I want you to take note of this, because one of the definitions will be one of the answer choices will be how you're used to seeing the word. So you don't want to fall into that trap. It's a very common trap. So maybe make a note to yourself. Don't assume that the word means what you think it means. It's probably being used differently. Okay, and that is our presentation on vocabulary in context. Now, if everybody will go to the calendar, you might have to refresh it and go ahead and do vocabulary in context 1. It's waiting for you on the calendar.